I'm Katerina Manoff, and I'm a Ukrainian-American nonprofit leader and writer. And I'm also a volunteer in the war effort, focusing on media work and supporting the Ukrainian Air Force. So we've all heard the term no-fly zone. You may also hear terms like air superiority or air dominance, and this is really all talking about the same broad concept, the idea of controlling the skies. So the party who is dominant in the air can protect its own ground troops while attacking the troops, supply chains, and critical infrastructure of the enemy. The other combatant literally cannot fly out because they will be shot down if they do, hence no-fly zone. To gain air dominance, you need a full arsenal of tools, which include fighter jets in the sky and medium and long-range missile defense systems on the ground. Ukraine is vastly outnumbered here. Depending on which equipment you're counting and how, Russia has anywhere from 6 to 10 times as much air defense weapons, both in the sky and on the ground. That was at the beginning of the war. And now, with Ukraine losing many of its weapons in battle and not really having a way to replenish those, the differences are even greater. So the situation is pretty dire. Ukraine's Air Force does not have the tools it needs to repel Russian attacks, and the US and NATO are refusing to provide or sell these tools. So when we hear about Ukraine's successes on the ground, tractors towing tanks, or Ukrainian troops having higher morale, or retaking dozens of villages, we have to put that into context. Unfortunately, they don't mean very much in the big picture unless Ukraine's allies change their current policy of refusing to provide air defense support. I think there's two options. It could be just another symptom of a bumbling, reactive foreign policy. Putin has been a threat for years, if not decades. The West has bungled its response to his aggression in Georgia and Syria, as well as his takeover of Crimea. As we think back to Syria and Obama's infamous red line, we can see this is not just a problem with the current administration. This is not just a Ukraine problem. Rather, it's a deeper leadership failure in the United States. America is acting based on principles of fear and appeasement of dictators. Conversely, this U.S. policy towards Ukraine might be very calculated, a conscious decision to let Putin slowly destroy Ukraine and weaken Russia in the process. If this is the case, then Biden and his advisors are purposely giving Ukraine just enough aid to keep fighting and keep bleeding, but refuse any step that could actually end the war and help Ukraine win. Fears of World War III play right into Russia's hands. If we use fear of nuclear war as an excuse to allow mass murder, rape, torture, war crimes to go unpunished, that just emboldens Putin and other dictators to keep going, to conquer more lands, to kill more people. However, President Zelensky has been saying for weeks, if the US and NATO are afraid of nuclear war, they don't need to enforce the no-fly zone themselves. They can just give Ukraine the tools needed to do the job. If it's Ukrainian pilots and soldiers who are flying the planes, who are operating the missile defense systems, then NATO is not entering the conflict directly. The West needs to figure out a way to get Ukraine the fighter jets and missile defense systems it needs. This is the only way the war can end. Current policies, economic sanctions, humanitarian aid, and military support consisting of other types of weapons are all useful and should continue. However, it is important to recognize these steps for what they are: secondary policies that cannot end the war without filling the primary need for air defense. This is really the worst of both worlds. The United States should choose. Either they should actually support Ukraine and provide the weapons that are needed to win the war, which are, again, fighter jets and medium and long-range missile defense systems, or if they're not willing to do that, they should be honest about it, and they shouldn't leave Ukrainians hanging, waiting for aid that's never going to come.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.